A very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar today. My name is Kiran Roybagi and I'll be your host this afternoon. Today we're going to talk about a zero-touch infrastructure management technology called Nutanix Prism Pro, which you can use to streamline your daily IT activities. We have a speaker for this afternoon who is Ajit Monraj, who heads the core division at NewWave Computing. And this session is scheduled to run for 45 minutes, starting with a session from Mr. Ajit, and we'll end with a Q&A session. So all the participants will remain muted, and you may raise your hand on the Q&A panel should you have any issues in the audio video. And if you have any queries in between, you can unmute yourself and post your queries to our speaker. Okay, so now I would like to invite Ajit sir to take this session forward. Ajit sir, over to you.
Thank you, Kiran, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ajit Andrew Monraj. And firstly, I want to welcome. These are all our existing customers. Some of you all have had the privilege to meet, and some have not had a privilege to meet. And in fact, Arjun D J, who is the business manager for Nutanix in the organization, was to run this session. In fact, he is not keeping well from the last 2 days. So unfortunately or fortunately, you've got me, right? So I'm going to try and make the best of it. But again, I want to welcome all our customers because this is primarily tuned towards all of y'all, especially all of y'all who have Nutanix clusters of different sizes that you'll have bought and upgraded over the years with us. And this is something new that's there. I mean, I think you're aware of it, of Prism Pro, because all of y'all, when you all bought your Nutanix clusters, it had your Prism starter that was there with it. But there's something new on Prism Pro, and we thought we would take this opportunity to spend maybe these next 30-40 minutes walking you through Prism Pro. We are seeing a lot of interest, and there are a couple of pilots as well going on. And hopefully at the end of these 40 minutes, you might also believe that I think this tool could be useful for me. So without further ado, I'm going to start. There's going to be a couple of slides, maybe about 10, 12 slides. And then what I did is I got a couple of demos together because nothing like actually seeing it. Not very extensive demos, I want to say right away. It's just to give you a sense of things and what is the capabilities of the tools. Okay. So I hope I'm audible, Kiran. Please stop me at any time if I am not sounding audible.
Right, so you're audible, sir. You're clear.
Okay, great. The other thing is we didn't host it as a live event because we wanted to keep it a little homely. So that's why it's more of a Teams meeting kind of an event pattern we chose. So I would request people to just be mindful about keeping the mutes on and the mics on, and please type in your messages if you have any questions. And towards the end we'll open up for a Q&A, right? So with that, I'm just going to go straight into this. And I would say that these are some of the key operational challenges that we are seeing, people who are running. And this is very specific to people who are running, the Nutanix clusters. Current challenges that we're facing and everywhere is, I have to look at a way in which I'm able to cut costs, the way I'm running this show. Very important during these pandemic times, because any investment now, as you know, you're being questioned on top, basically saying that, how is this going to help us save money? Or what can I avoid if I actually buy the stuff? What can I eliminate from the organization, right? So I think it's very important that y'all are under pressure to basically run, cut costs. And when I say costs from both a capex and an opex perspective, what I mean is that if you were planning to buy that additional node, for example, right? Do I then know, for example, am I currently running my cluster in the most optimal way? Is there a way that I can take out waste or inefficient stuff? And so therefore I can maybe defer that purchase, by 6 months or a year, right? That's what I mean by sort of cutting costs from a capex point of view. From an opex side of the house, we are beginning to see people, having to do the same or manage the same with less, right? When I say less, it could be staff that is redeployed into other projects, or some of the organizations are also on a cost cutting, there are a couple of layoffs that are also happening. But at the end of the day, you still need to deliver those SLAs to business. You still need to operate the way you are. So now you're beginning to reach out for some of those automation capabilities to kick in to help you on your level 1, level 2 kind of work that you do, right? The other challenge is in terms of troubleshooting, right? Which is not nothing to do with the pandemic, but the whole issue is that the time it takes me to troubleshoot is really determined of how much visibility do I have in this infrastructure, right? And can I detect issues in advance and remediate rather than have the issue happen and then I'm in trouble, right? So troubleshooting quickly also leads to a reduction in my unplanned downtime, because if it was going to take you 60 minutes to figure the issue out, could there be a tool which gives me the straight line of sight between workloads down to my cluster hosts so that I'm able to sort of understand very quickly what's going on and maybe take not take 60 minutes, but maybe take 30 minutes to resolve the same issue, therefore bringing up my unplanned downtime, right? Or reducing my unplanned downtime. Third, of course, is in terms of meeting SLAs. So the whole idea is that my VMs are actually driving applications which are enabling business processes. So I need to ensure that the SLA that I signed off with business is maintained and running. If there's any anomalous behavior that's happening on those VMs, which I don't know about, I need to get to know about them because they are going to be business impacting. They're going to affect my SLAs, right? So there's something that can help me there. And of course, the fourth thing is in terms of this whole forecasting and capacity analysis. When you're doing your what if planning, new workloads coming, somebody's doing a merger and acquisition, or new projects have to be spun up, I need to know very clearly if I actually do that kind of what if analysis on my existing infrastructure. And when I do the what if analysis, what Nutanix has done very interestingly is that they've kind of listed out a lot of workloads that you can try and bring on. And when we do the what if analysis, it's because we also understand the application characteristics of that workload. And accordingly, we tell you, hey, what is the kind of nodes that you need to buy and when do you need to buy this once we do that. So we'll see little quick demos around each of these things, right? So if I look at the Nutanix customer journey, you all are all very familiar with this because the Nutanix core is what all of you all have purchased over the years with us. And then, of course, you have Nutanix Essentials and the Nutanix Enterprise piece. I'm not going to go through all of this here, but just to call out very specifically that Prism Pro falls under the Nutanix Essentials piece. So this is a product that is paid for, right? And Prism Pro is more like a subscription model. You pay it on per node on a year-to-year basis. We'll talk about that. And I'm just going to probably, before we finish the show, have a small, a single slider on what files is all about and what flow is all about, right? So this is the whole gamut of the Nutanix customer journeys that you all can go to. I just wanted to call out the point over here where Prism Pro basically is an add-on product to what you already have in terms of Prism. Now, somebody was saying, but VMware doesn't have this, and vCenter does everything. So I want to clarify. For example, in VMware environments, vCenter is like your Prism in a sense. It is the management tool through which I actually govern and look after my VMware environment. But if you want things like performance, capacity, workbench, analysis, and things like that, they have another product called VR Operations, right? I'm just calling that out because some of you all might be thinking, shouldn't this all be there in Prism itself? No, so the thing is, it's not. It's built on top of Prism, and it's really the whole intelligence and automation piece that is riding on top of Prism. To very simply put it, that's really what it's all about. The machine learning and the automation, if I bolt it on top of your Prism starter, that's really what Prism Pro is doing for you. Okay, so in a nutshell, this one-click Prism story we know all about. Infrastructure management, it's everything to do with the provisioning of storage, VMs, etc. Also application automation, and this talks to the calm IO piece of the puzzle, where if I want to make programmable application stencils or programmable infrastructure stencils, all that's done through Prism itself. We're going to talk about the behavioral aspects of operational insights and a bit of the planning in this current Prism Pro story. And of course, the app mobility in terms of doing hypervisor conversions between ESXi, AHV, ESXi, all of that actually happens through this central console called Nutanix Prism. So what is Nutanix Prism Pro? So at the heart of this, and you already know one part of the story, right? The heart of this is the CrossFit or the XFit intelligence piece, which is nothing but my AI and machine learning part. And on the right-hand side is the other component, the most other important part, which is the crossplay or the XPlay automation part of the puzzle, right? So it's the ability now to automate, a certain series of tasks where if it becomes very repetitive, I basically want to minimize human error, right? I want to reduce the manual, repetitive task. I want you to be able to also scale your operations without really adding headcount and things like that. The magic sauce is in a combination of these two. So you need to be having a system that's actually watching, that's learning, doing a lot of machine learning on patterns and behavior that's they're beginning to see. You need to be warned and ahead in advance that something is going down. You need to be warned in advance that there's a certain anomalous behavior of this VM. And it's not like I have a threshold and if it goes beyond the threshold, I'm going to scream no. I do understand the behavior pattern of this VM. For example, if it is an HR server, I know that at the end of the month, probably, or if it's a salary server, I know at the end of the month, maybe salary slips are getting printed. So what I mean to say is that I understand the behavior of that application because for 30 days, it'll be quiet and for 31st day, there's going to be a whoop of activity. So I do understand the baseline behavior, but in spite of that, If I realize that things are going way beyond the baseline behavior itself, then I want to be alerted. Then I want to do certain amount of tasks. That's where the XFit intelligence and the CrossFit automation sort of work together. And we're going to see some of that in some of our demos. Okay, so like I spoke about, so Prism Pro really on the left-hand side is something that you kind of know already, which is the CrossFit piece of the puzzle. And the kind of new piece, right? Not really new because it come up in the earlier versions of it, is the crossplay part, or which is the automatic remediation or playbook, as what Nutanix calls it. So the point here is that it's something like this. If you have your VMs are short on something, for example, right, you may then automate some sort of an expansion plan, whether it's compute or whether you want to add more memory or more storage or more compute. That is something that a plan that can be automated in response to this kind of a condition. Just as an example, if you have a lot of inefficiencies, that is, you're having over provisioned VMs, right, or you're having inactive VMs, and you want to basically get back those resources, right, back into play, you might be running then a right sizing playbook to basically go back and get all those resources back into the cluster, especially now because you're having to clean up and you don't have money to buy new nodes, right? So I just need to know whether I'm running my current cluster as efficiently as possible. Or you find that there's a certain VM that's running into bottleneck. It is getting choked for certain resources, right? You may want to then give it some amount of a resource relief. So you want to have your automation playbook sense that you need to have an alert that comes out. You need to have already pre-programmed these plays. Again, I'm going to call it as part of your playbook, and those playbooks execute. And all that's done without you knowing anything about it, because that's really what the automation piece is, right? Or you find something is slowing down, right? You might want to take certain customs actions on it. Or like I said, you find an anomalous behavior, you want certain teams to be notified about it maybe. Or if you think you can manage something about that and you want to respond, you should be able to playbook that completely out. So it's really both sides working together. One side is basically trying to do the detection before the problems happen, and the other side is basically trying to remediate it, driven by the intelligence that is coming from CrossFit. So CrossFit, crossplay, very much part of a puzzle that make Prism Pro actually dance, right? So Prism Pro, these are the 4 key features in a sense. I try to simplify it so that we will follow the demos very, very well. So there are 4 key features you need to understand what Prism Pro would bring to your operation capability. Number 1, in terms of virtual machine right sizing. In fact, sometimes the value of this itself is huge. We had a customer running 8,500 VMs on a fairly large cluster, and he did not know in terms of, whether when there were new projects being asked. In fact, he said, I don't even know how many of them are idle. I know some of them are inactive. I do not know which team has it. I don't even find a way to find this out. I have a problem, right? So this first element itself, it's a small feature, but it's there, right? Is something called VM right sizing. So it's a widget, and we'll see that in the demos. And essentially, there are 4 types of, your VMs can be efficient or it could be inefficient. In the inefficiency piece, we've kind of broken it up across 4 of these different classes. Number 1, obviously you will find VMs. Example, you can say that 68 VMs, for example, are over provisioned. And what Nutanix says is over provisioned is that VM, if it's not consumed more than 20% CPU and not really consumed maybe between 20 to maybe maximum 50% memory, then we think we've over provisioned you for those resources, right? So those become candidates for you to basically right size. That's the first one. Second is constrained. I mean, there are VMs which you've not given obviously adequate, resources. So if the CPU count is hitting at 90% or memory utilization is hitting at 90%, pretty obvious it'll be called out as constraints, right? And therefore they need more resources, right? The third type of inefficient VM is something what we call as bully VMs, right? These are the big VMs who are consuming unnecessary or too much resources, therefore starving the other virtual machines that are there on the node, right? Now, typically this could be a representative of 2 things. Number 1, either that VM requires the resources, right? So therefore it actually might be choking on IO resources. He needs more. Or it's just a bully VM. It's just it's hogging 85% or 90% of that particular, let's say, parameter of IO. And either that could be a misbehaving VM, or it, like I said, it could be a VM that requires more resources. But that is something that can be flagged off, and you can actually have a look at this, right? And when I say 31 inactive VMs in your environment, from a Nutanix point of view, Prism Pro calls out those VMs which have been not powered on for the last 30 days. So we kind of classify them as dead VMs, or it could be a zombie VM. It kind of, comes up once in a blue moon and goes away. And when I say comes up once in a blue moon, there's less than 30 read-write IOs happening in a 30-day period, or a read, or a write transmission of less than 1,000 bytes per day, right? So typically like a zombie VM. Really do not know why he's coming. It's literally almost inactive, right? So you'll basically get this classification and these reports at a click of a button with Prism Pro, right? That's one thing. Second is the anomaly detection. Anomaly detection, and we're going to see demos. By the way, these are the 4 demos that I'm going to run for you, so you'll see it in depth later. But anomaly basically means that we are going to be running machine learning algorithms underneath the hood. We know that, right? So when do I think something is anomalous? Number one is that I'm going to look at your past 21 days minimum of baseline behavior. And once I understand your baseline behavior, there are 28 metrics that Nutanix Prism Pro watches. And if there's, I understand your, so if you see in that little picture, the little blues that you see over here, going up and down, these are your actual utilization of that particular resource, right? Then in this case, it could be the controller resource we're looking at, right? And this larger blue pattern over here is the learned behavior of that particular VM over a period of time, right? So moment something spikes beyond a particular point here, I will term it as anomalous. That means you've gone beyond your learned behavior baseline, right? And I'm then going to not only be able to tell you anomalous behavior from a VM perspective, it also extends to the host. And if you are running multiple clusters across your different offices, I will be able to also pop up and say that this particular cluster in Delhi is showing anomalous behavior. And then I can drill down, as you know, Nutanix video. And this, this engine is actually running every 5 minutes by default at the back, looking at those 28 metrics, measuring it against a baseline behavior, and then calling it out. Right now, again, once that's called out, again, with the cross play piece, you can create a small playbook to respond. It could be alerting, it could be responding, whatever it is. We'll see an example of that. But that's anomaly detection. That's the second piece of the puzzle, right? Required, especially if you're running your tier 1 VMs who are generating, let's say, I would say very critical business applications. You cannot afford to go down. I need to keep my SLAs going. I want to know when those VMs begin to sneeze or cough. This is what anomaly detection is all about, right? The third one is the what if and the capacity planning. And here, essentially, what we are saying is that you have a cluster, and we'll see a demo again of this. And I want to know that when I'm at the rate at which I'm actually provisioning my current workloads, for example, when will I run out of the component products, so either memory or CPU or disk, in how many number of days, for example. Or the second part of it is that I also understand my what if analysis, like I said, takes into account application workload characteristics, right? So I can, for example, choose a particular workload and say that I plan to, because maybe a boss has come and asked you, we're going to do a small, let's say, a SQL project. I need to understand whether we can actually, this cluster will handle maybe 10 database instances that I need to spin up. So you will be able to do that in the capacity planning and the what if analysis. And in a sense, you can get a report like this, which says that my existing hardware is 4 nodes, but to actually handle this demand, just an example, you probably have to buy these nodes, additional 5 nodes of 3060 nodes are required. And this is the date in which you're going to need to bring it in. And we'll see that in a demo. Right. And this again can be a report that's printed out and it's shared with the big boss. And all this will take you 10 minutes to figure out. Right. In the absence of this tool, it's going to be an Excel sheet that you're going to do. You're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out can we not. So we take a lot of that guesswork out of the planning completely. Right. And the fourth part of it is nothing but the cross-play automation piece. Right. So basically, it's all about automatically acting before business is impacted. That's what I talked about, right? So essentially what we are saying is that there could be a trigger, right? Or there could be any event that happens. It gets into, it's really that trigger is going to make me look at, maybe generating a message to relevant teams, right? And then I go and execute a set of predefined playbooks that I have done. So I could have a playbook, and there are out of the blocks, I think about 23 odd playbooks that are there. And a playbook is nothing but I define a trigger, I define the action that I need to take, right? And there is really no end limit to what you can create as a playbook in response to a certain event, right? So we'll see a small example of that, right? So that's really what playbooks are doing. And like I said, the trigger could be an alert or it could be manual. You want to trigger something, right? Maybe at the end of the day. And these are, for example, some of the 22 out of the box playbooks that you get. You maybe want to power off something. You maybe want to add CPU. You may be wanting to generate some sort of a forecast report. All this is done automatically clicked as part of an automation task. And you can now build up your own playbooks, right? 23 of these come automatically. So that's just a quick introduction of the Prism Pro capabilities. I thought we'll run into a quick demo before I just complete the session, right? So I'm just going to switch over screens to, I've captured this in VLC. So let me just switch over to my screen. And Kiran, just tell me whether this is what we can see this.
Right, sir. Yeah.
You're able to see this? Okay.
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, so the first demo, very quick demo that I'm going to talk to you about is the VM right sizing that Prism Pro brings. And like I said, for one customer, this was worth a lot of money for him, right? So let's start the demo. And if you see over here, I'm in my Prism Central, and I'm just going to stop it for a moment. And I'm just going to draw your attention to this piece, so the puzzle here, which is nothing but we talked about the VM inefficiency widget that we spoke about, right? So in this demo, there are 34 over provision, 15 inactive, 6 constrained VMs, and 0 bully VMs, right? So let's carry on. And so I go clicking into this, for example, and I will then be taken to the next screen where there's a list of all the over provisioned VMs that are there, right? So I'm just going to pause you for a moment. And this report essentially takes me to the screen where I basically done a filtering of 49 filtered VMs out of the 75 total that I have. And if I basically go on to the right hand side, as you will see slowly,
So
I
we
can
cannot see
filter
anything,
this.
sir. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Is that better now?
Yeah, now I can see all the lists, sir.
Right. Okay. So the list, right? So what I'm saying is if you look at the top right hand side over here, we are basically going to filter these VMs, and I can filter the VMs based on whether they are bully VMs, right? Or, I just only want the over provision ones. I want the constrained ones. This is a short list that I can do, right? Makes it very easy to filter out of the 45, how many of them are 49, how many of them were whichever they were. So if I look at that first VM that we see over here, that is a DC2 North SE1, right? I'll notice that it is inactive, right? And like I said, inactive is really about a VM being either 30 days switched off, or it's been actually showing zombie behavior, right? In terms of 30 IOs per month and less than 1,000 bytes per day being transmitted, etc. So there is an opportunity to actually get this entire VM back by contacting that owner, whoever that resource owner is, saying this is what I noticed, right? I want to bring that back in. And when you bring that back in, you're going to get back CPU memory storage anyways. And more importantly, that if you had, let's say, a server license or a particular database license or any particular, I would say expensive license that was running on that VM, this is an opportunity for you to also get that license back to you, right? So I think in a sense, it's good that this is the first report where it's a good spot to start cleaning up your setup and getting back resources into the common pool. This is, I think, a very, very good place to start the inactive reports, right? Now, if I look at in terms of one of the over provision ones, right? If I look at, let's say, the top row, let's just go to the top row part over there. That is the DC North SE1. And this is being classified as an over provisioned inefficient VM. And when I look at the over provisioning, right? I'm just going to pause here and I'm just going to go on. Kiran, tell me if you can see the magnification.
Yes, sir, we can.
Yeah. So what does Prism Pro say in terms of over provision VMs? That the maximum hourly average CPU usage seen for this VM is only about 4.38%, right? Which means it's really over provision from a CPU point of view. And if I look even from a memory point of view, right, it's less than that 50% threshold that Nutanix Prism looks at. The maximum hourly average, right, is about 38.7%, right? So this becomes a great opportunity for you to look at this vision. Again, contact those owners and say that we will be resizing this. And you can actually write a playbook for this where, once the machine is considered, you can't immediately go and do it immediate. It's when the machine gets switched off. Moment I sense the machine is switched off, I can then run a particular playbook wherein which I can resize the CPU and the memory allocations for this and, inform the user by mail or by a Slack mail and then come out very clearly without nobody having literally done physically anything. This is a completely automated activity. So this is just a very quick, 1 or 2 minute demo. And this is what very, very useful for people who are running a very, I would say, a very busy cluster. Great idea to know what is the opportunity for me to pull back on resources, right? The next one that we're going to look at is this whole thing about anomalous behavior that we spoke about. And remember, the anomalous behavior is at a VM level, at a host level, and at a cluster level, right? So let me start that particular demo. So here, I'm in my Nutanix Prism Central, as we know. So I'm just going to go to the Explorer view so that I get a listing of all my virtual machines. And in this little demo, for example, I'm looking at the the demo 2 VM, which I've been told is having some issues, right? So if you see over here, this is the standard metrics that you guys are very familiar with. This is the CPU usage, the metric usage, and over there, I'm going to pause again for a moment and just get to the corner here. If there were some anomalous activities that were spotted on this particular virtual machine, right, it will be sort of called out over there and maybe a number that is called out over there, right? So let me go back. Kiran, am I okay in terms of the display?
Yes, sir. Perfectly all right.
Yeah, fine. So it shows that anomalous behavior. And so what I can do is I can look at the metrics and let me look at the CPU metrics, for example, because I found out that the alert was there, right? And again, Prism Pro will give you my CPU anomalous behavior on CPU, whether it's on storage or memory or IO bandwidth, etc. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm expanding this baseline to include about the last 21 days of CPU usage. And then I get this graph, right? Now this blue line that I'm showing you over here is the actual CPU usage noticed on this VM, right? That's what the VM is currently running at. And the lighter blue shades that you see, the plus and the minus piece of it, is the XFIT machine learning capability of this VM, because what XFIT has realized is that there is a certain behavior baseline, which is that plus and minus that you see in terms of the blue shades, right? So plus and minus. So the moment you go beyond that, for example, is when I consider it very anomalous, right? So that's the plus and minus component of it, right? So if I look at it over here, I seem to see that there was a spike. There was one anomaly that happened there, right? It went up a little bit and then it didn't go back down. In fact, it sustained itself and it carried on for that period of time, that we saw. And then not only did it, and you'll realize slowly that the behavior, the XFIT again is learning the new machine behavior after that anomalous behavior has come in. And then there was a second spike again and a whole series of anomalous behaviors there as well. And so these anomalies, you can actually go down later, click into it. But what I want to also point out to you is that if that continues to remain the way it is, after getting your alert, machine behavior also begins to think that maybe this VM is beginning to operate in this fashion. So the plus and minus part of it is also there, right? So if I want to then double click, I can double click further down into that anomalous behavior and see the details. So not only are we able to see the anomalous behavior from a VM point of view, right? I can also extend this behavior from a host. Which of my nodes particularly are having a problem? So here, for example, I'm going into my hosts. I'm picking up Brandy number 4 as a host. I want to look at the metrics. You see obviously it's a similar metrics that you see from a CPU memory perspective, right? And then I will expand that view to include the last 21 days base of baseline. And then of course, from a host level point of view, also I see that there was an anomalous behavior that was called out. So anomalous behavior in Prism Pro basically has been enabled simply because there are what we look at is your baseline. So there has to be a history. So we go back 21 days, right, for that particular VM to run for me to get very accurate anomalous behavior alerts. 1. 2 is, remember, there are 28 metrics that is part of that machine learning algorithm. It is at a VM or a host or a cluster level, right? And it is running every 5 minutes by default, can be configured, but it's running every 5 minutes by default. So that's the anomalous behavior, especially those VMs which are critical. I certainly want to get them turned on. I certainly want to be informed. And those anomalous behaviors also can be further sort of tuned. You can decide, I don't want this anomalous behavior stuff. I want a standard threshold, right? About 70% ke upar if it happens. So you're able to configure that as well. Or you can say even in the behavior, baseline that you find out, you let me know when it goes 30%, up to 30%, don't give me any alerts, right? Suppress all those alerts. But moment it goes 30 or 40% beyond the baseline for a sustained period of time, let me know, right? So even your behavior baseline, if it's spiking beyond that baseline and you can configure that percentage and then you want to be alerted, all of those good stuff is actually very configurable, right? So this is coming out of the CrossFit part of the exercise, right? The anomalous behavior part. I'll go on to the third quick demo because remember, there are 4 things I want you to take back to remember what Prism Pro is all about. And this is all about the just-in-time capacity planning, which I'm sure all of us at some point have been asked to do, right? Whether there's a new merger and acquisition happening, so we have to get those workloads on our cluster, or it's new projects that are coming up, right, in the next 2 to 3 months. And they need to know whether we can run it on this and what can I do, etc. Right? So let's have a look at this. So this is actually a video that was captured. Somebody's had his own lab done. So the reason I say lab done is because you won't see too much of utilization, but the idea of how to do the water planning was very well explained in this video, right? So you say, let's get started. And so we will get started. And we go into this, the Prism Central part of it. And so here, actually what you see, I'm just going to pause it. And I am, sorry. And I'm going to go over here. So this is basically the overall runway, right? That means your current cluster is able to run for the next 365 days. We've set us a target for 6 months and say, give us a 6 months look. 6 months look is fine. In fact, for the next 12 months, we're okay. Because remember, this small POC lab with a couple of nodes, right? So I'm good for CPU for 365 days. I'm good for memory. I'm good for storage. All that good stuff. I'm pretty okay. My cluster seems to be pretty fine, right? And over here you can see the existing hardware, whatever is part of it. And there are 4 nodes. And I've been calling it out for 6 months. So your boss comes down and says that, okay, I want to have a sort of a view over the next 12 months because we are basically going to, let's say, acquire an organization. And as part of that M&A exercise, I want to know whether your current clusters, do we need to buy any nodes? Are we good to go on this, right? So for example, let's just say that when this M&A happens, we are probably adding in maybe 15 virtual machines, just as an example. We're going to do 2 runs in this. And what are those? They're typical standard VMs, right? Might say it's a new profile. And I might give it a name. So we'll say merger and acquisition VMs. Give it a memory of maybe 32 gigs, maybe for the server. That looks good. And maybe 500 GB for the storage. You get the idea, right? And maybe 15 VMs of this, right? Now, again, I want to just pause over here and say that this is part of where it looks like a simple screen. We are actually simulating.
I lost you, sir. I don't know whether others are able to hear you or not.
Am I okay now? Am I audible now?
Yeah, it's audible.
Sure, thanks. So I'll just repeat. So this is a screen where we are adding on a workload. And again, I'm going to say the Prism Pro understand the workload characteristics of the workload you're adding. So you saw a drop-down list, right, in SQL, VDI. And if it doesn't fall into any of that, there is another option to create your own workloads, right, and give us an idea of the dynamics of it. But for example, when I say, what do you mean I understand the application characteristics of VDI? Moment I put a VDI in, and if there are 2,000 VDIs, I have to anticipate that there would be a boot storm in the morning when people come in, right? So therefore, I have to anticipate for that spike in the beginning, and therefore it might require more CPU, more memory to handle it at that point. So when I say that this what if analysis comes with workload characteristics built in, that's what I mean, right? So in this example, 15 VMs are being added. I want to check whether I can run it on my particular cluster. And when I look at it, I'm pretty okay because it's all green lights there. And so I'm pretty okay. If you notice that bar has gone from 6 months to 12 months on the top, I'm very, very good. Then the boss comes and says that, no, we now want to add on about 2000 VDA because now, if we are finally coming into one company, we're going to probably look at Citrix and desktop. I'm going to have power users maybe. I want to run about 2000 VDIs on this. And so power user kind of a profile. I might even want to say the date when I want this is going to come. So I can tell the what if analysis that 1st of September, Sunday, it's a good day to start any project, right? This is what I need. And immediately you begin to realize that you're running into trouble, right? This is again a what if analysis. It may not be as clear as 80 days, 80 days, 80 days. Remember, this is a standard POC lab with really no workloads on it. But if it is your cluster, you might realize that CPU will run out of 160 days, memory may run out of 72 days, storage may go on for 200 days. You may get very different hamburger looks. This is what I call like a hamburger. So in this case, by adding 2000 Zen desktop VDIs, I have realized that I am not going to go beyond 80 days, right? And my plan was to basically do it for the next 12 months. And if I want separate matrices as to when, am I good? These little red dots at the bottom are when your first workload of 15 VMs came, life was normal. And then when I bumped in the second workload of, these 2000 VDIs, I just blew past my capacity, right? So I'm gone from a CPU perspective and a memory perspective, right? So if you've noticed over here slowly, and I call it a hamburger, right? Because it's a nice little hamburger, a multi-layered hamburger view that I get. But importantly, I'm running out in 80 days. Now, you have seen that there is a blue recommended button that immediately pops up when this happens, right? And that's the power of actually your XFIT story. So when I click on the recommendation, right, what it's going to say is that if you want to sort of tide over this plan for 12 months with this kind of a workload, it's necessarily that you need to add on a couple of 3060 nodes, and maybe 13 of them need to be added, and they need to be added on the 22nd of August. I can also give you a date as to when I think you need to get this done. And this configuration, again, you can tweak it from a config point of view, and you can also maybe change the numbers that you want in terms of not 13. Maybe we'll say we need to add n plus 1. So we'll add 14 nodes in my own calculation. And we leave everything as it is, right? So moment I do that, you will realize the screen tells me back again that I'm pretty okay to handle these workloads, provided I add in those 14 and add it in August. And then what I can do is I can generate a PDF report. There's a very nice report to give the boss back. By the way, this is all being done in about 10 minutes, right? You're going to save hours and hours of Excel work that you would otherwise do. And in the capacity planning report, this is a high level summary. For example, without the new hardware, we were failing at 80 days. With the new hardware, it's 365 days. These were the workloads, a couple of new VMs, 15 numbers, and then we had a VDI planned. Right, these were the existing 4 nodes, and there were some new nodes, 14 that were asked for. Right, so that's a quick summary that somebody gets. And it's a very calibrated one because remember, you're using machine learning and what-if analysis with application workload characteristics. Then it talks about the current usage. If you realize the usage is very low because really this is a POC lab. This is currently what we have. We have 4 nodes, right? Give somebody a good report on this. And of course, these runways, again, since it's POC hardly being used, I don't see any utilization stories here. But in your case, it will be showing you your current CPU, memory, and storage utilizations, right? Then you talk about the modified parameters, and this is the projected usage after getting in these workloads, which is your 15 virtual machines and your 2000 VDIs. And we anticipate that this is what it's going to look like with a fault tolerance of 2, data reduction of 1.45:1, all of that good stuff. This is where our utilization parameters would be, right? And if I go down further, that will basically call for the addition of 14 nodes. This is the kind of capacity. And are we good? These are all, we are all good, right? This blue graph over here, those workloads that you see, those 2 little dotted lines on the top are the workload 1, workload 2 coming in. So from a CPU,
sorry for interrupt, sir. Looks like video is not playing, sir. Yeah, I think now it started playing. Yeah.
Playing? Okay. Yeah.
Now we are in new capacity runway page.
Yes, that's where I am. So in the CPU runway piece, I'm good. In the memory runway piece, I'm good, right? Adequate headroom is there. And keep going down. I show you the storage runway. Very neat, very quick report, very nice, can be created for you. And the best part of it is that you can save this report, right? And maybe you can send it off if it's a meeting that you were doing with somebody. Quickly, you can just save and say, okay, this is what we agreed. This is what we discussed. This is what we need. If you're going to do this, when are we going to do this? And by this date, we need these notes coming in. I can actually save that scenario. Let's say meeting number 5 on this project was done and quickly email it off to the bosses, right? So it's a great, story of whatever you have right now. I'm sort of, piggybacking on top of it and doing a lot of what ifs, then telling you where you're going to bomb and giving you insights into different workloads that you could run, etc. Right? So that's the third video for me. And the fourth video is to just show you in a very simple way the power of a playbook, the power of the cross play story, the automation piece, right? So here is my Prism Central, right? I go on there, I open, click down and get down to the playbooks section. So right down there are plays, get down to the plays. And this is all about creating a playbook. Right. So what is a playbook? So a playbook, like you see in the picture out there, there is a trigger event that happens, right? Either manually or there's an event or an alert that hits me. Next, with that alert, I might then decide what are the defined actions that I need to do in a particular sequence that I need to do. And then after that, I've defined that, I can then save that particular playbook, and then I can call that particular playbook when such an alert is received, for example, right? And the nice thing about this playbook is that we are also now able to interact or connect with ServiceNow or with any other third-party tool which has a webhook API, because we're using webhook as an API to connect. So if you want me to send some information up to your upstream resource, playbooks are able to do that as well. So let's just get started. And the scenario here that we're going to play is a very simple one. But again, this is just a very representative sample of what a simple playbook could do. I'm running a Tomcat web server. It's got about 9 gig of memory. Next, what we will do is we'll run a small script, right? Start increasing the load automatically on it. Obviously, when I start increasing the load, certain parameters are going to go up automatically at the back. And when it reaches a particular threshold, that's when an event happens, which is then going to call a playbook, which is going to be at the back, automatically going to increase the memory from 9 GB to 10 GB, right? So that's the quick, again, very representative, but very sample playbook. So this, for example, is a playbook. There are some 22 to 23 out of the box playbooks, and you can create your own playbook, right? So we will use the playbook about auto remove memory constraint, because you're going to make sure that this Tomcat server is dying of memory, right? And we want to increase the memory from 9 to 10. So there's already a pre-planned playbook. I can pick it up. Right. And if I look at this playbook and have a look at what it looks like, you see on the left hand side, very simple. There's a trigger, there's an alert that comes in. And what am I going to do? I'm going to snapshot that machine, because if something happens, I certainly want to be able to roll back to it. Next, I want to hot add the memory to it. Third, I probably want to inform maybe the VM monitoring team that's monitoring that particular Tomcat VM that I've done that increase. I may also want to send a Slack resource to a Nutanix person, whatever it is. I'm saying you can use any mail system that you want. And then I'm going to conclude and acknowledge the alert, right? Again, just a simple example, but your imagination is going to be your limitation, because with playbooks, we can do a lot of very creative actions and therefore start automating a lot of the L1, L2 work at the back. And therefore, you don't need to augment teams to manage more with the same or less staff. That's where I'm coming from. So example of the automation, right? So that's really what it looks like. So we'll hot add memory. We'll snapshot it first, hot add the memory. We'll email and Slack and get going, right? That's what we are doing. 1 GB we are adding on. Here is when you can put a little descriptive message if you want to make it more personalized to the alert that's coming. And we do that. Whether it's email, you're using Outlook or whatever it is, I can actually send messages across that, right? So with that, what we're going to do is we will use that. And now I'm just going to go to my dashboard. And I'm going to see the list of VMs, right? And there you see the Tomcat VM. And I'm going to call your attention to the 9 GB that is there. It's got 9 GB memory. So I'm running a script now at the back, which is basically going to tax that VM quite heavily on the memory. And what's going to happen is I've already enabled the playbook at the back. So we're just going to watch for that playbook to kick in. And technically what you should see is that 9 GB automatically gets pumped up to 10 GB automatically when that event gets hit, right? It's a small example, but very representative of what you can do with playbooks, right? So we'll keep watching that because I'm sure the load is increasing with the script that I've run at the back. And very soon, very shortly, you're going to see, somewhere on top, the event console suddenly getting refreshed. Telling me that the 9 GB is now moved into 10. So loading in, and if you see that 10 GB is already run, right? Now, remember that part of that script also involved informing a couple of people, right? So I might also want to see how did the playbook run? Were there any problems? So I can go back to that playbook, for example, and I can see the plays. How many times has this played out, right? Now, this is the recent one that we have on the top. So I want to click through it. And I want to make sure it's all success. Yes, everything is succeeded, right? There was snapshot done, hot add memory, email, all that was done. This was all sent out, what time, etc., all that's been sent. And maybe I want to log in as a user. I'm in my Outlook client, and this is the VM monitoring team, me, receiving a message from Crossplay saying that this is to let you know that we've increased 9 to 10, etc., all that good stuff. And of course, if I'm using Slack inside, then I just get a Slack message as well. Telling me that that particular activity has happened. Again, simple automation playbook that we've just written. But the point is that I think the richness of it is, the playbooks that you have. And there is a gallery of playbooks also available from which you can adopt and modify accordingly, right? So this is the Slack update that we get at the bottom saying that we've detected a memory constraint. We have run the playbook of auto remove the memory constraint. As a result, blah, blah has gone from added 1 more GB memory to Tomcat, right? So those are, I hopefully has given you some sense of it on this webinar in terms of, sorry, let me just get that up. In terms of these 4 things, right, is what Prism Pro brings to you, right? Some of the new cases that have got added in terms of the, the cross-play piece of it is we can integrate bidirectionally, like I said, with ServiceNow or any third-party tools that use the webhook API. We can schedule these tasks to run, right? I can enrich mail notifications by making it more relevant to the subject that we are doing with variables that we can pass. I can also do approvals. So I don't want something to fire automatically until somebody says so. And when something goes off, like when that VM goes off, for example, I can pull back memory, pull back storage, all of that good stuff I can do. So these are some of the new cases that were added in the April 2020 release of it. So in summary, the Prism Pro piece of the puzzle is going to be able to answer you these questions. Number one, from a performance perspective, can I achieve automated resolution of VM performance issues? I think we just saw some of that with my playbook and my, my intelligence and my playbooks coming together. Can I detect anomalous VM behavior, especially on my, class 1 VMs, right? And can I get them automatically remediated as well? Absolutely. Can I learn to predict and avoid contention? Yes, you can, right? I can get a look at all those VMs, anybody getting bullied, anybody constrained, I get to know immediately, right? And can I reduce unplanned downtime? Absolutely, yes, because if I can predict and see something in advance, I see an anomalous behavior happening, I can take corrective action, right? From a capacity point of view, some of the questions is, do I even know what I have? How much is used? How much is remaining? Big use case for a lot of y'all who are running a busy cluster, right? When will I run out, right? And more importantly, how much will I need, right? What capacity can I reclaim? How much of inefficiency am I running on my setup? And what is the infrastructure to do these what-if analysis? Because I'm being asked by the boss that we need to run, change things. Can I produce these reports? And we saw in a matter of 5 to 10 minutes, you can actually produce something very intelligent and share with him. So from a performance and a capacity point of view, that is what the power of Prism Pro brings. And of course, from a management point of view, how's my global environment doing? I get a cluster view. Like I said, I get a cluster view, I get a host view, I get a VM view if I want of anything. How can I find problems versus dealing with alerts? So remember, I said that we can set thresholds. I don't even want to know when I break a behavior up to maybe once it's sustained for beyond 30%, then I want to be alerted, but don't crowd my alert screen, for example. How fast can I troubleshoot these VMs, hosts, and clusters in production? Again, it's a representation of me knowing things in advance, me knowing funny behavior happening, and remediating it before something can badly go wrong, right? Again, Prism Pro brings up this whole upgradation of clusters very easily. I didn't touch upon it because it's a slightly extended topic, but the point is that if you have multiple clusters all over the place, right, and you want to basically intelligently update those clusters, Prism Pro allows you to do that in a very structured, in a very step down fashion, as Nutanix always does, right? And can I automate operational tasks? Absolutely, with the cross play story now and playbooks. Imagination is your limitation, I would say. So in the Prism edition, what you all have received, and some of you all have all got with the Nutanix cluster, is the Prism Starter edition. And you see on the right hand side there, Prism Pro brings out these three things: the automated optimization, the remediation, the proactive piece, and the operational part of the story, right? And for those of you who want to know, how is it priced? Well, it's licensed on a per node basis, right? It's a subscription only. You can't buy it as a license. It's a 1-year term. And the thing is, if you like it, run it for 12 months. If you don't like it thereafter, you're not burdened with it. Take it off, right? And there is a 60-day trial license that I urge you to try it, because the kind of wealth of information that you're going to get and being able to play with all those scenarios I spoke about, I think you will see enormous benefit of having this person constantly watching your cluster for you in your absence, right? Pricing for it is at 3,500 per node per year, includes the support as well during that period of time, right? And we did this exercise. So Arjun will come and do that exercise with you. There is a TCO that works out in terms of so we talked about in this particular customer's environment. For example, let me just put the laser pointer. Yeah, so he started out with 18 nodes. He added on 2 in year 2, and he added another in year 3. And he obviously had to buy he wanted to buy the Prism Pro licenses. So he has to buy 18 license 2 and 2, etc. But I want to draw your attention here. This is an output of a big sheet. Takes about 30 minutes to do it with you. But these are the necessary 5 areas of savings that can happen, right? It will differ from individual to individual and organization to organization. So I request you to, if you think you like the tool, play with it, sign up for the trial in the feedback form that Kiran will send you. You just have to indicate whether you want us to help you set that up as a trial. It's very fast to set up. Play with it, use it. I'm telling you, you will guarantee want to buy it. And when you come to buy it, you will have to justify it in this manner up to the CFO or to your top bosses, because you just can't say it makes life easier and faster. We need to put values to it, right? So the fact that I can actually avoid buying hardware because I'm able to optimize my wastage is one big ticket where we avoid spending an additional node or buying the additional 2 nodes. I thought I needed 3, actually I only need 1. I thought I needed 1, actually I can avoid buying any. Right? Reduction in unplanned downtime is all about those automation pieces. Some people are at a 97% uptime. They want to move it by 1%, right? All this whole thing about anomalous behavior, watching machine learning, seeing who are bully VMs, all of that come into play to help you with this unplanned downtime. So there's a detailed sheet behind this. So I just want to tell you that once you have tried this and you like it, then Arjun will walk you through this session with you and leave the Excel sheet with you, because there are things like salary and things that we put in there. We make assumptions. You can actually right size it to your environment, right? So before we go, I promised you I want to just highlight 2 things to you. A lot of you all will know about it. Just want to remind you all actually about it. Nutanix Flow, software defined networking, people talk about it. I'm very, very simple. Nutanix Flow is about these 3 things. Application visualization, that is, I want to visualize who all, what all is coming into my workloads, and who all and where all is my workloads talking to. And I want to be able to control that. That's the first piece. Second is a micro segmentation part. We all know the story. Want to limit the east-west side of the house. And third is I want to be able to do some amount of service chaining capability as well. For example, if I've taken Checkpoint as a service in the cloud and I want all my packets to actually be moving to the cloud to get serviced and come back, right? I allow that service to be chained as part of the flow that we do, right? So for example, the application visualization is very simple. This is your app. We will define your app, right? These are the sources of inbound traffic into your app, and this is who your app is going to talk to on the outside. in a simple what the app can receive and what the app can send to, right? So when we run it, and again, these are all trials that you can try. And if you like it, we can get you those flow licenses. Again, it's on a per node basis, right? So this is just a simple picture where I'm saying that these are 3 authorized flows. And I noticed that these flows were not part of the deal, but they seem to be talking to my infrastructure here. So I can do a monitor only or an enforce mode. In a monitor only, it won't enforce anything. It's only going to tell you what are the flows that I'm detecting, right? On the other hand, you could have a scenario where your workload, which is your web app tier, for example, is should be only talking to this guy. But I'm finding it talking to a lot of recipients on these other subnets, right? So I can then, once I know the monitor and I see my traffic flows, I can then put it into enforce mode where all these unnecessary flows will be stopped automatically by flow, right? So at the end of the day, then you get a very happy looking application flow of traffic. And the beautiful thing about it is nothing big to set up at all. Very, very simple, 30 minutes, you can start getting these kind of reports. And the east-west traffic is that even between my own stack right here, which is I got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe it's a 6 node kind of a configuration. I'm defining this guy can only talk to this guy, right? This guy can only talk to this guy. So a bit of that east-west piece of the puzzle is also getting sorted along with the flow direction that you're talking about. So use cases could be simple. I want to basically segment applications in their respective little areas, or I want to very clearly demarc dev and post on my common Nutanix clusters. I can do that with flow. VDI security, literally giving each VDI their own little pod. It's as if they are micro segmented at each VDI level, right? For those who don't understand that, for example, if I have a VLAN, let's say VLAN number 10, and I have 10 people sitting on it, right? Now I can make sure that VLAN 11 doesn't talk to VLAN 10, but can I stop everybody on VLAN 10 from talking to each other? I can't. But that's exactly where the Nutanix flow comes in. And I can cordon off each one of those guys and make sure the number 1 guy can only talk to the number 3 guy, or the number 2 guy can only talk to the number 4 guy, or 5 cannot talk to anybody. All those fantabulous things that I can do from great example at a VDI level itself. And of course, if you have compliance workloads, maybe it's a PCI workload, a set of VMs that you're running over there, you want to sort of make sure that they are guarded in to those set of nodes or that area itself. You can make sure flow will allow you to do that, right? The other thing, of course, is the Acropolis File Services, AFS. They've termed it as files now. In a simple story, what is it? It's nothing but your scale up or scale out NAS box, right? And it's all about having a single namespace. And the point over here is that if you've got so many nodes and you're enjoying the resiliency factor of 2 and 3 and all that you set up in your cluster, and you're already having, your VM storage here, you can also carve out like, iSCSI targets over here. Well, you can also carve out even your file services, storage over here. And why not have your file server also enjoy the resiliency factor that you set up and all the great things of Nutanix, right? So that is what files brings. So it's not about standing up separate Windows file servers as VMs in Nutanix is the way some of you all are doing it. I'm saying this is a common namespace. Don't worry about how many nodes I'm spreading it over. But when you come to me, it's like saying one big pen drive, maybe 20 terabytes. Doesn't matter. It's like putting that one pen drive in and I see it as one big D colon. I don't see it as file server 1 D colon, file server 2 D colon, D2, D3, D5. I don't see it as that. It's one common namespace in which I can create my folders for video, pictures, anything that I want, right? So that's available. And again, last thing before we go, about a week ago, some of you all may or may not know that 5.17 was launched, the AOS 5.17. I just put 6 of the little interesting things that I found. There are a lot more. One is, of course, first thing is that there's AOS support for AMD processors, and HPE is actually the first of these OEM partners to bring out nodes that are released on AMD nodes. So for people who are waiting for that, that's available now on 5.17. Very, very long overdue. AHV supporting synchronous replication, right? With an RPO equal to 0. We were dying for this. That's there in 5.17. Rack level failure domains for Hyper-V. People who are running Hyper-V clusters. If I want to have rack level domain failure domain set up, so that I put node 1 and rack 1 and node 2 and rack 2 and node 3 and rack 3, so that if a rack blows out, I don't lose my cluster. Well, that's now available on Hyper-V clusters. NearSync DR, interesting thing is that in 5.17, we basically brought the RPOs down to as low as 20 seconds. It was much higher than that. UEFI secure boot. This is basically making sure that malware doesn't creep into your OS before you even start. It was there in 5.16. They've just a good reminder to say that continues in 5.17. Essentially, AOS now supports secure boot. It was supporting it in 5.16. 5.17 also has that feature. And there is a certain amount of advanced DR orchestration that's come in, especially more in terms of custom scripting certain applications, and especially this whole thing of IP address and IP renumbering when you're doing the DC DR failover failback. all of that good stuff has now got additional support in this orchestration part, right? So with that, I've come to the end. Very quickly, for those who don't know us, and I know all of you all know us, essentially we're the Edge Core, and we continue to be Edge Core and Cloud, offering product, solution, and services to all our customers. And for some of us some of you all have not visited us, or we've not visited you, our shame. These are some of the new things that we've done over the last 9 months. Of course, our portfolio breaks across workforce transformation, IT transformation, security, and digital. Workforce is all about those PC, laptop, work from home solutions, good amount of solutions there. IT transformation is what we are talking a little bit about here. In this example, it's the Nutanix Prism Pro, but everything to do with setting up private clouds and environments, redoing backup transformation, moving from tape, wonderful solutions from Delhi MC there. Security transformation in a big way has happened for us over the last 6 months. There we partnered with Fortinet. So anybody who's looking for either perimeter, endpoint, application, they got some very interesting work from home and cloud-based protection. We have a division that looks after that. And in October of last year, we actually signed on with Automation Anywhere because we're beginning to see the digital transformation piece of the puzzle beginning to happen, right? So with that, I come to the end of this. I mean, we are probably 10 minutes over. Arjun's contact details, you all know him. He's available. You can reach out to him. And Kiran is basically going to shoot a feedback form to you. And I think in the interest of time, Kiran, are there any questions? Maybe a couple of minutes and then we'll close.
Right, sir. I think that was a wonderful session from you, sir. Especially I personally loved the demo part of it because that gave a clear-cut idea of what technology can do for our customers.
Thank you.
And now we open up for our Q&A session. Participants, if you have any questions that you want to post to Ajit, sir, you can unmute yourself and ask your questions.
Maybe it was a lot I packed in, I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm going to ask, Arjun is going to call each of you all for sure in the interest of time, because I want to be cognizant that it was a 3 to 4 webinar. But certainly reach out to Arjun's email is there, his number is there. And in the feedback form, please tick the option that you want some, you're looking at the trial licenses. We put up the options for Prism Pro. I put up the options for Flow. I put up the options for files. My honest suggestion to you, try them out. Right? You don't like it, no worries, because I think at these times we are trying to look at technologies which help our customers sort of, manage their way through this environment. And we thought the Prism Pro brought that simply because of the automation capability it had. And we felt that this was a good webinar to run for our existing customers to say that's there, try it, you like it, we'll get it to you. Right. So Kiran, back to you. It's 4 o'clock. Thank you once again. Yeah, over to you, Kiran. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. And also thanks all the participants for joining us today and making this webinar a successful one. As Ajit sir already said, I'm gonna send out a thank you note, and there'll be a link to take feedback on today's webinar topic. Kindly take some time out of your busy schedule and give your feedback about our work today's work. Thank you so much. Have a nice day ahead. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ajit. Thanks.